It's 5:30 on June the 24th, 2018. 50 years ago to the minute, BBC Radio Leeds began broadcasting from the Merrion Centre in the heart of the city. Now, as a station which serves the whole of West Yorkshire, we invite you to listen back to 5 decades of one radio station and say happy birthday to
BBC Radio Leeds.
The roots of Radio Leeds lie in pop music and politics and an overhaul of BBC radio services in 1967.
Well, there we end broadcasting in the night programme, not just for today, but as it seems forever. The night programme, that is, well, as it's known now, is closing down.
Don't you know I was making love from a world all around her? Yeah, hey, hey.
Tomorrow at 6:35 a.m. we become Radio 4. So, goodbye. Home service. 2 of the best words in the British language.
Wait for the news that will happily say Radio 1 is at last on the way. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I really am oversimplifying here, but in 1967 the government made offshore pirate radio illegal. It told the BBC to replace the pop music stations with a legalised national service. That led to the creation of Radio 1 and the complete reorganisation of BBC Radio per se. And crucially, that included a commitment to create something called local radio.
This is BBC Radio Leicester.
To serve local people, to promote their interests, to promote their prosperity, to inform them what was going on in their neighbourhood, to be a forum for the discussion of their problems, in every way to help the local community and to make local life more interesting and to enrich the standard, the quality of life locally. That was what I wanted local radio to do, and I felt that there was a very great need in Britain for that kind of service.
The late Frank Gillard, who at the time was the BBC's director of radio, created local radio and had a clear idea of what he wanted it to do. So BBC Radio Leicester went on the air in 1967, and 1 year later they were putting the finishing touches to a new studio complex in Leeds, as Radio Leeds prepared to go on the air. It began at 5:30 on the evening of June the 24th, 1968.
You're tuned to BBC Radio Leeds on 94.6 VHF. And very soon Radio Leeds brings you its first transmissions at 5:30.
The time is 5:30. This is BBC Radio Leeds.
Radio Leeds is a bloody waste of time.
Sugarloaf, how do you feel about having your own local radio station in Leeds now?
We like it very much indeed.
What would you like to hear on Radio Leeds?
Now then, girls, what would you like to hear?
Anything interesting that's happening?
Yes, anything that's happening.
Some music, news. Well, not only music, you want the projects, anything that's important to the people.
Any speakers that's giving a talk on anything that's interesting for us. We're never too old to learn, you know.
Those are the voices of some of the people of Leeds, from the voice of the city, Radio Leeds.
If you can't get a sound out of Radio Leeds, well, it's not that your set is decrepit, and you're not going deaf, it's on VHF, and there's not many radios can get it. But come down to Radio Leeds, just walk in, you're welcome to enter. They've a radio car and a budgerigar in a fish tank in the radio centre. Well, yes, tonight's the night, it's frightfully lightly and it's toenail bitingly exciting. Tonight's the night when we're invited to cock up our ears to Radio Leeds. Radio Leeds.
Lord Mayor, what kind of a local radio station would you like to see in Leeds?
Well, one that lives up to my own reputation for freely expressing oneself, and I hope the opportunity will be given to anyone who feel have a genuine grievance about things, as far as the city is concerned, being able to push your door open, to come in, and hope you'll provide the facilities to them of selling it to the rest of the city, and in that way becoming a controversial medium of expression for people, and in addition providing some form of reasonable entertainment in addition to that of creating controversial situations. And if you do that, you'll be doing a good job of work. In other words, you'll be bringing to Leeds what I felt as far too often being only London and Manchester. Leeds is entitled to be on the radio map.
Your station, Radio Leeds, out on 94.6 VHF. Now, even though this is our opening day and a festive occasion for us, we would like to remind you that we will be bringing you information about buses and trains as affected by the railway's work to rule. Well, from our first citizen to several hundred others at the town hall.
These are the birth pangs of the radio station which we now know today. You can tell it's from Yorkshire, but what we consider to be slightly old-fashioned, slightly posh BBC voices can still be heard ever so slightly. The studios were based in what was the fashionable Merrion Centre, and BBC Television sent a film crew up to report on what was going on there.
And so Radio Leeds started in the surprise way it intends to go on, complete with a live hookup to a Mongolian who happens to speak English in Ulaanbaatar, and the nearest the BBC has yet got to a commercial programme.
Hello, this is Ralph Robinson, your man from Auntie, with the only BBC programme money can buy. You can buy time on OPMCB simply by sending a donation to charity. So send in your requests and your offers of cash. Remember, it's your money we're after. Let's hope we get piles. Now calling Alan Holdsworth. 5 bob to hear Up, Up and Away, played backwards. Well, Alan, you're in luck.
And if you detect an air of irreverence about the whole operation, well, perhaps we're partly responsible. 24 Hours can claim that the station manager, Phil Sidey, is one of its old boys.
When we looked at the problem of bringing its own radio to Leeds, we thought a little buffoonery was the answer. But it's buffoonery with a ruthless purpose, survival. For instance, we have a ludicrously small budget. So when we wanted a piano, we advertised for one under the heading, "Have you something capable of giving pleasure to millions?" We had quite a large number of offers, of pianos I mean. And when the winning piano came to the studios, it was followed in by a passing pianist who offered his services, so we got him as well. And then our record library isn't as big as the main BBC one, so we thought up Bring a Disc, where you can ask for any record in the whole world, as long as you bring it along to the studios yourself so that we can play it. This rather cheeky approach to broadcasting is also partly to offset the still lingering idea somehow that the BBC is toffee-nosed.
Well, hello there. Yes, top of the bill, your weekly roundup of entertainment around Leeds.
Rule Britannia and all that lives again with the opening of Theatre Festival 1968. Having seen the show, we know more about Victoria. But what we really would like to know was how the fight started at the VIP reception afterwards.
Now, within that report, you heard Phil Sidey, the first managing editor, or general boss, of Radio Leeds. Years later, he recalled just how difficult it was to start a radio station in 1968, given that the staff felt very much on their own, and also the hostile opposition coming from the local press, who presumably knew a threat to their news monopoly when they saw one.
I believed, and no doubt entirely erroneously, that the BBC wasn't as enthusiastic as it ought to be about its own infants. And so it was up to the infants to do some propaganda on their own part. And we did actually do quite a lot. I wrote many articles and we organised what unkind people would call stunts. And we did get a great deal of publicity. At that time, the Yorkshire Post group, for the reasons best known to themselves, wouldn't mention the words Radio Leeds in their columns at all, under any circumstances. And this became a challenge which I think I first circumvented by getting a greyhound to be called BBC Radio Leeds, so they'd have to put it in their runners. It was a great tussle to get known. I mean, why should people in Leeds know they'd got a new radio station? There's no way unless you happen to accidentally come upon it. Or you advertised, and we didn't have any money to advertise on posters. We couldn't get it in the local paper. So I'm afraid you had to devise methods of bringing the attention of the good people of Leeds to the fact they had a radio station. But the idea I wanted to do, and it's common as dirt now, was to mix up local news with national news in the way that a good provincial paper does. News, after all, is what people want to hear, and they want to hear about their local affairs, but they also want to hear what's going on in Russia and America. And if you mix them up, then I think you produce a different bulletin from the ones that were then current. Everybody does it now, but we were the first to do it. We were the first to collect our own news in Leeds. And indeed, the BBC, I think it's an open secret, were not at all pleased at the idea of our endeavouring to cover the world as well as Leeds. We did endeavour in those early days to rub it in that they were listening to Radio Leeds and not to some other station.
And there was some good music around at that time as well. Quite whether Radio Leeds had any of it is unclear, because the station's record library wasn't very full at the time. The Rolling Stones were at number 1 during Radio Leeds' opening week with Jumping Jack Flash. Other chart acts included The Love Affair, Scott Walker, The Herd, and also Donovan.
Thrown like a star in my vast sleep, I open my eyes to take a peek.
Naturally, Radio Leeds played some of the pop music of the time, even during its early days, but it also catered for the tastes of the many and gave organist Arnold Loxham a platform right at the start. Here he is in 1968.
My Girl's a Yorkshire Girl introduces a special farewell solo organ recital by Arnold Loxham on the Wurlitzer organ of the Odeon in the Hedrow, Leeds. But it wasn't always your personal signature tune, was it, Arnold? In fact, it's not your signature tune.
No, it isn't. As a matter of fact, my signature tune is Come Back to Sorrento, rather strangely enough for a Yorkshireman.
What made you pick that?
Well, actually, the BBC are to blame for this, because when I did my first organ broadcast in '47, they wanted a signature tune that could be extended over the announcements which were done in London, and which could be made as long and as short as necessary. And also, in the theatre, I wanted a tune that would go up and down and right at the top of the hit parade at that time, you know, just long enough to take the organ up and take it down, was the coda of Sorrento. So I thought, well, why not? It's a popular tune, it'll live forever, and I adopted it.
Hello there. Welcome to the first of our half-hour programmes for Christian people. Today we're taking a look, amongst other things, at animals versus children, hydrogen balloons, and a white father. First of all, what does it feel like to be a parson for 10 years? Are the first 40 years the worst? Charles Kitchell tried to find out.
The Reverend Eric Illing is the vicar of St. Mary's, Middleton. Eric, 10 years ago today, you were ordained a priest. Tell us, what sort of thoughts are uppermost in your mind as you celebrate this occasion?
I think the main thought in my mind is a thought of thankfulness that God called me to the priesthood and that I was able to answer this particular call.
And then there was a curious little programme called Local Colour.
There, what did I tell you? Old Irving's predictions never failed to come true. I told you last week, didn't I? I forecast it then, and as always, with uncanny accuracy, it came to pass. Christmas can't last forever, I said, and you see, I was right. It didn't. Oh, I know it isn't over yet, but it's on the way. Did you have a good day? What's that you say? Just about the same as last Christmas Day? Well, yes, I suppose so. I mean, this year's turkey is just about the same as last year's, isn't it? Only dearer. If you went to a party, I wonder if by any chance it was at Chorlton Parva. If it was, well, you'll know all about it. If not, well, Jeff Robinson was there. Now he's here with a first-hand report.
At Chorlton village every year, old folks what's hale and hearty, and getting o'er their Christmas cheer, is axed out to have a party.
And no, I don't really have any idea what that was about either.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Phil Hayton, there for the competition, which I hope you're all going to enter. Don't forget there's 30 singles to be won there. I hope they're not railway signals. On we go with number 5 sound right now from Mr. Tommy Rowe, everybody. This is the 3rd week in the charts for Tommy with a record called Dizzy. So how about this? In, out, shake it all about. Hey!
Dizzy, I'm so dizzy, my head is spinning.
There you go, everybody. That's number 5 sound from Tommy Rowe called Dizzy. The next record, number 4, is from the Beatles, and I was introducing this record in all the discotheques by the title Get Lost, to which everybody immediately got up and went out of the discotheque. I lost my job, and now I'm with Radio Leeds, which is a much better proposition. Lovely station to work for. Here we go, number 4 sound, Get Back.
The technology was primitive in those days. The desks were only designed to last for about 2 years. The whole thing was experimental.
Richard Barnes was one of the engineers at Radio Leeds, right at the start.
The first 8 local radio stations had been built as an experiment by the BBC just to see if it worked. Like all things in local radio, almost from day one, people wanted to do far more with the equipment than it was capable of doing.
Now everybody at home, come in on this bit with a big ooh. Ooh. Oh, beautiful. There you go, everybody. Number 4 sound from the fantastic Beatles with Get Back.
Radio Leeds.
When you want to put a phone call through from a listener now, there are 6 lines normally for incoming phone calls. You simply select the one you want to one of the desk channels, press a couple of switches, and you're in business. But in the early days at the Merrion Centre, there was nothing like that.
Well, you need 5 bits of wire with a plug on each end, which gives you 10, right? So you take one end and you put it into the incoming red line. You take that from there to a parallel strip, from the parallel strip to the front end of the televalence unit. You also go from the parallel strip to a 600 ohm jack that stops the call dropping out when you hang the phone up. You then go from the back end of the telebalance unit into the input to the spare channel. You switch the spare channel to A only so that you can derive a clean feed from the desk. You take the B output of the desk and you bring it back to the input front end listen of the telebalance unit, and hey presto, there you are.
Just
That's right, Frank. You're telling to hold the line. In fact, we've got some other telephone here at the moment.
Yes, you're quite right. Well, actually, we've got...
You've just dropped in,
on
actually.
the air now, actually.
Frank, can you stop talking while I'm talking? Right.
Yeah, I'm speaking to you from this.
Turn to the wall.
Just hold on, Dougie.
Well, the exciting news is that we've got local comedian Dougie Clark on the telephone, all the way from Bridlington, where he's playing a summer season. And you're going to now witness the intrigues of how we get people on the air when they ring up on the telephone. Frank, just ask Dougie if he can hear the programme coming down the phone.
Dougie?
Can he hear us?
Yeah.
He's got it, has he?
Hold on it, right.
Good enough.
I'll just get myself sorted out.
Right. Are you there, Doug? Yeah. Good enough, right.
There we are. Right. Thank you very much for being rung up in such a hurry, Doug. Now, look, what's all this about, you getting into trouble for running a hotline across the prom?
Well, you mean my famous hotline, Jungle Telegraph?
Hello, you there?
Hello, yes.
I don't know who the house is.
Yeah,
However, carry on, Doug.
the line on my hotline.
What did you do about this problem, then?
Yes, I am. Who those 2 are?
I'm sorry about this.
You're on the air, ladies. Hello?
Yes,
You're being broadcast. If you kindly put the phone down.
Oh, did you hear that?
Yeah, will you do that, love?
Oh, gracious. All right, then I'll put the phone down. Right,
okay.
Right, thank you.
Are you there, Dougie?
Yeah.
Right.
Now don't forget, this is all from the days of post office telephones where cross lines were a common occurrence. That's if you could even get a line and weren't forced to use a shared line, known then as a party line.
Do you like sweet and low late night music?
You do? Well, there's a programme especially for you on 94.6 VHF every Saturday night. The title of the programme is Sweet and Low, and it comes up at 10 o'clock all the way through till midnight.
Early members of staff from Radio Leeds tend to say the place was just that little bit anarchic, and you could hear that in the programming coming out of the Merrion Centre during the late 60s. But if the shows were slightly off the wall, in a very BBC way, so was the hiring policy and what we'd now call the training and development strategy.
Well, I'd had a touch in pirate radio. I'd done a little bit of teaching in the Middle East and in Cheshire.
Philip Hayton ended up reading TV news bulletins on BBC One after starting out at Radio Leeds.
And I was vaguely thinking about going to university when I was looking for a summer job, and I went along to Radio Leeds, the walk-in and talk station, met Phil Sidey, the very charismatic station manager, and said, here I am, I've got some radio experience, I'd like to join your radio station. And he chuckled and said, well, how about reclaiming some tape, which meant demagnetizing tape. And he gave me, I think, the princely sum of £5 a week out of the petty cash, and that's how I started, and that lasted for a month or two. And then, you know, how things are. Sometimes newsreaders didn't turn up to read the news, so I rushed into the studio and helped out. And one day there wasn't anyone there to present the top 10 shows, so I did that. And gradually it all built up, and within, I think, several months, I was what they called a station assistant and on the staff of Radio Leeds.
Leeds and the World at One. This is Alan Shaw reporting.
Alan Shaw was the first Radio Leeds news editor. Jeff Leonard was one of his first newsreaders.
I actually owe a debt of gratitude to the people of Leeds because I learnt to read the news on the air. Nobody taught me before. And the first time I read the news, and the next time, and the next time, the people of Leeds were subjected to the most awful, stuttering guy who couldn't read words off the page into a microphone. It was terrible. I know it was terrible, but I learnt to do it. And I also learnt another rule, which is you never do it to anybody else. If I ever had to open a radio station and get somebody on the air, I wouldn't let them learn on the air because it's the wrong way to do it. But I did, and I learnt the hard way how to read correctly on the air. Radio Leeds Jazz Club.
Come 1970, BBC Radio Leeds was 2 years old and the initial local radio experiment period was over. The radio station was to continue broadcasting, but it had a problem, and it was all to do with what were then called wavelengths.
Hello and welcome to another Radio Leeds Jazz Club from the New White Bear here at Tingley Crossroads. This is Bill Kinghorn, and once again we have the trio in the club. This week we'd like to play a number of standard tunes from the jazz repertoire, and the first one is called Time After Time.
So there was Radio Leeds broadcasting away on VHF. How many people had a VHF or FM radio in the late 60s and early 70s, do you think? Not many. Britain still listened to everything on medium wave, even if the sound was muffled and the signal faded in and out at times.
49.26 meters around the world on shortwave and 208 to Western Europe. This is Radio Luxembourg with Martin and Finlay, and it's another Sunday.
Radio Leeds' first boss, Phil Sidey, said that launching and broadcasting on VHF meant many people never really heard the radio station because they only had medium and long wave sets.
Well, it was an enormous handicap as far as counting the viewers are concerned. I mean, VHF has been one of the scandals of British radio life, really, mainly because of the very conservative and self-satisfied ways in which set manufacturers failed to rise to the new VHF. But, you know, people move slowly in these areas, particularly in the set manufacturers. I remember in the early days of Radio Leeds, we tried to offer for nothing labels that wireless set salesman could actually tie on the set saying this takes VHF and that'll get you Radio Leeds, and they weren't terribly interested. They didn't realise it was a brand new market.
And then when I tried to find Radio Leeds, all I could find was Radio Humberside and Radio Middlesbrough. So I thought, well, I'm the nit. I don't understand this, you BBC.
The BBC's been asking the government for permission for a better transmitter for Radio Leeds for a very long time, and that was in June last year. Well, it's a long time since last June now, we're still waiting.
VHF 94.6, BBC Radio Leeds, the time 5:30.
Your 5:30 headlines, the latest in the Paul Reaney story. The evacuation of Malta begins, a new exhibition hall for Leeds, and snow is on the way.
After 1970, we got a new FM transmitter at Home Moss. If I tell you that the original transmitter was 50 watts, and the Home Moss transmitter, certainly when it came on, was 5,600, there's a slight difference.
Early Radio Leeds engineer, Richard Barnes again.
Very quickly, Bradford, Halifax, Huddersfield, Wakefield got involved, and it became county radio. This was officially sometime in the early 70s that decision was made. So they had to have a transmitter that could be heard in all those places.
And in a moment we'll have the news headlines, but before that, a reminder that after the news headlines in 2 minutes' time, it'll be time for City Spin, your Thursday request programme. And at 5:30, after City Spin, we'll have Evening News First Edition. Now, tonight at 6:02, it's once again time for Personal Choice. This is the programme in which Rory O'Dowd talks to members of the BBC Radio Leeds staff and plays some of their favourite music. And this week, Rory has chosen to talk to John Orson. And John Orson, known to you through the programme Sweet and Low on Saturday nights, and also the mastermind behind all the engineering problems which we have at Radio Leeds. So that's 6:02 tonight, Personal Choice.
By Christmas 1971, T-Rex were in the top 5 and Radio Leeds had a stronger VHF transmitter. But crucially, it still couldn't really pull the listeners in because it didn't have a place on the medium wave. Yet. And change was slow then. I mean, after all, we'd only just adopted a new currency that year.
Well, there go my pennies and threepenny bits. John, have you had a lot of people bringing this type of money in to be changed over to decimals?
There's been a steady flow, mainly from children, people who've been breaking open the piggy banks, this kind of thing. We haven't had a lot. It hasn't given us a lot of difficulty, a lot of problems.
What is the value of an old penny now? Is it still the same as it always was?
Exactly the same as it always was until the 31st of August.
So what am I going to get for my load here then?
You'll get £1 for every 240 pennies.
And what about the threepenny bits?
There again, exactly the same, £1 for every 80.
But cometh the new year of 1972, Radio Leeds finally got what it wanted and what it had been after for 5 years.
And with the Leeds Town Hall clock striking 8, we welcome you to BBC Radio Leeds, broadcasting for the very first time on medium wave 271. This is Liz Ambler with Rory O'Dowd.
And from 8 to 12 this morning, it's Hello West Riding. Yes, with news on the hour, music competitions, and a chance to meet people who live, work, and enjoy life in the West Riding.
It says 1972.
Here's a man whose voice you may have heard earlier. He's called Steve Hay.
The Beatles had broken up. I was going home. It was about 6:30. The phone rang on the news desk. I picked it up, and it was somebody ringing in to say that they thought they'd seen Paul McCartney in a Leeds hotel. So I found a Ewer. That's what they used to, the tape recorders used in those days. And I was going past his hotel on my way home, so I called in and I said to a waiter, someone's told me, Paul McCartney. He says, yes, he's having a meal in the restaurant. I had a little Radio Leeds card with my name on it, and I said, take that into him. And Paul McCartney came out of the restaurant with this Radio Leeds card, my name. He said, you must be Paul McCartney. He said, I'm Steve Haig. He turned the thing round. I said, I can't believe this. How did you come to be here? And he said, well, I'm relaunching myself. Linda and myself. We've gone back on the road with a new band called Wings. What else do you want to know? I said, would you give an interview to me? And so we found a little quiet room. Linda McCartney came in, and we did an interview. And this interview was the first interview that Paul McCartney had ever given, since the split of the Beatles, announcing that he was he was relaunching himself with this band called Wings.
You see, I mean, like, the only thing, you're saying, well, you're a star and all that stuff. The only one danger of doing this thing, which is a danger I'm prepared to risk, is that people might think, like that, oh, well, he's running out of money, or can't get the big gigs, got to do all these little gigs, they're scraping. But the idea is purely, we could get big gigs. I mean, we've had offers to play at Madison Square Gardens, that kind of stuff, But I don't particularly want to do that kind of work at the moment. I like just being in a group, having a blow, and playing near to just a smallish type audience. That's the way I get my kicks. We've done a new single, which should be coming out very shortly, and we hope you're going to play here
next week
on Radio Leeds. It's called Give Ireland Back to the Irish. Listen, the thing is, that the Beatles thing it was. And it's no use just sort of trying to sort of hang on forever, and sort of think, well, we could get them together for a little record once a year or something.
But the people want you to come back together. The people want the Beatles.
Yeah, but it's too bad. Because unless I wish to be in the group called the Beatles, and unless the Beatles wish to be in the group called the Beatles, it really is just too bad,
So you don't take any notice of what people want? You're not bothered about what the
Yes,
public
of course
wants.
I do, but you can't take too much notice about what people want, because you forget what you want. And that's the worst crime of all.
Do you think you'll ever do what the Beatles did with this band?
I won't do the same thing, no. I think as far as I'm concerned, I'm just some fella who used to be in a group called the Beatles. The Beatles split up, so quite naturally, that job's over. So quite naturally, you don't hang around with all those people, still you look for something else. And that's all I'm doing. And it's a group called Wings, and we're having a great time doing the kind of things the Beatles could have never done.
I mean, that was a world exclusive. And you can hear Linda. Linda's just in there, isn't she? And it was a world exclusive for Radio Leeds. And then it made all the newspapers, and newspapers couldn't get hold of Paul McCartney. And in newspaper articles all over, everywhere, they quoted the interview from Radio Leeds.
A spokesman for West Yorkshire Police said that drivers have, generally speaking, been keeping to reasonable speeds when faced with these snow and heavy rain conditions. Now, for a roundup of the conditions at the moment, we're going over on our direct line to the RAC.
Hello?
And what's the situation at the moment?
Can you hear me, Ralph?
Well,
Strange to think, really, that this was a time where getting an interview with Paul McCartney was easier than getting a traffic report on the air.
6 minutes to 1 o'clock. And now let's try going back to the RAC for the current weather situation.
Good afternoon, Ralph. Is that any better? Good afternoon.
And we seem to be having this problem. Let's see if we can call up the RAC and ask for the present situation for motorists in the region.
Hello, Ralph. Can you hear me now? I don't know what the hell.
Radio Leeds largely pioneered the idea of a phone-in on BBC local radio, but even in the early days they were just the same as they are now. Sometimes they can turn into a nightmare.
Hello, Mrs. D. I'm sure you're there.
Mrs. D of Paramain. Are you ringing me?
Yes, we are.
Oh, right.
What's your question?
Now, listen, it's about a very vivid dream.
Yes,
who am I speaking to? Am I speaking to the...
Yes, there's Dr. Stratton in the studio, and he's listening to you, if you'd like to tell us about your dream.
Righto. Well, it was very vivid. It's years ago. And, just a second, someone's at my door. I'm on the phone, love. Will you come back? Well, I call it a nightmare, a very vivid nightmare. See. Will you come back, love? And, anyway...
We had the finest football team in the whole of Europe, and probably, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, probably the best club side in the world in Leeds United throughout the time that I was with Radio Leeds.
John Helm was the Radio Leeds sport editor during the 1970s.
And it was superb to be following that team throughout Europe. Saturdays inevitably the programme would start with Leeds United, with dear old Douglas Lupton reporting on Leeds United matches. And there was one irate lady who used to ring me up week in and week out, and she used to say, "Why the hell don't you start with Leeds Rugby League sometime? They're as good as Leeds United." And of course they were in their own world, and my only answer to her was, well, when Leeds Rugby League are pulling in 40,000 as Leeds United were, then I'll start the programme off with them. But yeah, they were tremendous as well.
Brian Clough and Leeds United have come to a mutually agreeable arrangement to terminate his employment with the club, effective as from tonight.
I'm feeling very friendly towards Mr Cousins. Everything is fine between him and I. I think it's a very sad day for Leeds. I think it's slightly sad for football. But having said that...
Why do you think it's sad for football?
Well, time involved...
No, Big Ed! Big Ed!
Get out!
You're rubbish.
The first thing Brian Clough did when he emerged from the board meeting which saw the axe fall was to order champagne and no doubt drown his sorrows. I asked him when he first knew that he was soon to be packing his bags.
Well, there's been developing over the last 48 hours, and the final thing was a meeting between me and Mr Cousins and the board of directors tonight.
You said it was an amicable parting. That sounds strange for somebody who's leaving a club after only 44 days.
It was in the sense of the way it was done. Everybody was reasonably happy.
Has there been animosity between yourselves and the players, as suggested there?
I would say the least thing that attributed to me leaving Leeds was the animosity between me and the players.
Looking back over that 5 weeks, do you ever regret coming to Leeds now?
Oh, no.
And that's the sound of demolition, which is already underway at Quarry Hill Flats. But the real blitzkrieg's due to begin next Monday, the 28th. The only problem is that there are still people living there, and they're in no hurry to get out. 4 flats are still occupied, and all but one family have agreed to go. Len Swinnerton has been given a place in Saxton Gardens, but he says he'll move in when he's good and ready.
Around about 14 years I've lived here, and the place is all right. I liked it here. And I don't want to leave, as a matter of fact, but I've got to go. I'm one of the last on the job now, which is...
This is from 1977, and we're playing it because, irony of ironies, Radio Leeds is now based on that very site.
Well, the council wants everybody out by the 28th,
yes,
so that they can start pulling them down properly. Are you going to be out in time?
I don't think I'll be out in time, no. If I'm not over there, the time they want me over there, they'll have to bloody wait. It's as simple as that.
Well, then, as people have moved out of Quarry Hill Flats, have you had a lot of trouble with rats and things?
Well, you get them running over your head at night time in droves, but I'm not bothered about them myself, personally speaking.
You're not frightened?
No, I'm not frightened of them, no.
Do they ever actually get into your flat?
No, they're not in the flats. I've had mice in, and that, But as far as the big fellas, the queer fellas, no. They're running packs, yeah, and you can hear them. It's about 10 minutes before all clear's gone.
How many would you reckon there are up there, then?
Oh, Christ almighty, there must be bloody thousands of them.
You're listening to a local radio station, The Voice of Yorkshire, at 5.5 minutes past 10. Down Your Ginnel with Nigel Fell. And that's the rousing introduction to Down Your Ginnel with Nigel. But Nigel's still in the radio car on the way to his Ginnel, I think, aren't you, Nigel?
Yes, that's right, Frank. Good morning to you. We're on our way to Cemetery Road in Beeston. We're doing the programme live this morning from the home of Mrs. Conlon, one of our regular listeners, and we'll be arriving there hopefully within the next few minutes. So, Frank, I believe you've got some music on the turntable.
We have indeed, and of course we've got the invitation that if there's anybody else in the Cemetery Road and Beeston area, then Nigel will be very glad to pop in to see you as well as Mrs. Conlon. But a piece of music just to give him time to get there and to get his microphone out of the back of the car.
This is the Voice of West Yorkshire, across the county on 774 medium wave and 92.4 stereo VHF, 95.3 in Wharfdale.
If you've just joined us, a very good morning to you and welcome to Radio Leeds AM this Monday morning, the 12th of May.
This is the sound of Radio Leeds in the 80s.
The Leeds weather, we have a beautiful spring morning. The news headlines.
Jet fighters from Cuba have sunk a gunboat belonging to the Bahamas Navy. The 7-week printers' dispute, which has affected production of provincial newspapers, has been settled. The mass funeral of the victims of the Tenerife plane crash is to be held later today, And former Chancellor of the Exchequer Dennis Healey has denied claims that the TUC's planned day of action has been badly organised.
Among this morning's AM points after the news, we'll be looking into the background of the sinking of the Bahamian gunboat, strange things happening in the trees at Bretton Country Park near Wakefield, and the 12-year-old Guiseley girl who's West Yorkshire Cyclist of the Year. That and lots more after the news in detail from Mike Smith.
Do tell about the time when you were in Leeds when you had your first heart attack.
Just down the road.
Oh.
Down at the
Where
infirmary.
was it? But where did you actually have it? You were in the car?
I had it in the car.
The year is 1981, and sitting in the Radio Leeds studios, now on Woodhouse Lane, is the comedian Eric Morcom.
I just finished battling. I said to Annie, I said, I don't feel too good. So I'm going to go home, back to the hotel. Mm-hmm. And I had a Jensen in those days. Yeah. Or two, I had one for each foot. And I was in the car, driving along, and suddenly the pains got a lot worse. And I was into Leeds, it'd be about 1:15 in the morning. And I was driving along, and I had to stop the car because I was in terrible pain, and all the sweat and the flop sweat and everything, you know, all based on fear. And I see this lone figure, Walter, walking across the road. So I think, well, you know, he may be able to give me a hand and get me to a hospital, because I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't realise I was having a heart attack. If I had done, I'd have had a heart attack and died.
Was it not like you thought? I mean,
oh no, I thought
everybody fears
attacks.
and thinks, God, what happened?
Yes, I always thought, you know, a heart attack was a tremendous pain in the heart, and you got a lot of thumping and all that kind of. But mine wasn't like that. It was up the arms and across the shoulders. I stopped him. I said, I wonder if you could give me a hand. I don't feel very well. Could you get me to a hospital? He said, yes, I will. You know.
Did he know you?
Yes, he recognised me, and and he sat in the car, and I said, will you drive? So he got over the other side, and he'd never driven any. He'd only driven tanks. And we went through Leeds, I'm not kidding, at 70, 80 mile an hour.
Yeah. You were still conscious?
Yes, that kept me conscious. I promise you that. Red lights, we did the whole bit. 2 wheels. It was quite fantastic. And he got me there. He got me to the hospital. And he took me to one hospital, and they wouldn't let me in. And then he took me down to the hospital here, the infirmary. And I went in there, and the fellow behind the counter said, hey, because Walter had run in saying, Eric Morcom's here, and he's very ill, you see. And he said, hey, everybody, hey, it is him. It's him, hellfire, it here.
Radio Leeds. Metronome, West Yorkshire's most comprehensive guide to rock music.
Yes, hello, good evening, and welcome to the final programme of the current series of Metronome, your local rock programme.
Hello, Tony Fisher here. Every Sunday afternoon from 1 o'clock on The Voice of West Yorkshire, the lines are open on Leeds 44 3222 for you to pick out your favourite song from the top 40. Also, there's competitions like the first note, the best of 5, and also your chance to enter the true or false competition. It's all part of the Tony Fisher Quiz Show, this and every Sunday between 1 and 2:45, only on Radio Leeds.
We've caught the moon, West Yorkshire. BBC Radio Leeds.
Well, in the past, workers' tea breakers often visited the places of work where many people are employed. This week, quite the reverse. In a moment, Ian Tim shares an afternoon cuppa with somebody who works on their own, but with a lot of other people. Confused? Well, here's a little clue provided by the Radio Leeds staff choir for you.
Lollipop, lollipop, ooh lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop.
Lollipop. And that should give you some clue as to what workers' tea break is breaking for tea with this Tuesday. A lollipop lady is a bit of a standalone job. Standing outside Morley's Cross Hall Infant School was June Daw, a veteran lollipopper of some 20 years. I wanted to know how she pops her lolly, and indeed why she started.
When my daughter started school, and the headmistress asked me if I would like to take the job for 3 weeks trial to see if I would like it. I think I might settle to it.
The music of the night. And that ends our workers' tea break for this week. There'll be another one for you at the same time next week.
At 5 o'clock, this is Ashley Peatfield. The headlines. Emergency services search collapsed building in Halifax. Customs officers seize major drugs haul for second day running. And West Yorkshire business leaders confront the Transport Minister. Emergency services are searching through the rubble of a factory in Halifax after its roof collapsed a short time ago. All staff at the factory have been accounted for, but the search is still going on for any other people who still may be trapped. Philip Connell reports.
The incident happened at machinery removals on Turney Street at Ovenden in Halifax just over half an hour ago.
BBC Radio Leeds.
The sporting headlines. Terry Yorath pays out to come home. Wakefield Trinity's coach says justice has been done as Paul Delaney is banned. And Huddersfield Town prepare for a true test of their playoff hopes. At 5:21, this is John Champion.
Let's see what's happening on West Yorkshire's roads instead. Here's Mike Alexander.
I'm here certainly with the red nose on. Lengthy A1 tailbacks northbound through West Yorkshire tonight, which is not very funny, I'm afraid, due to a combination of heavy traffic and roadworks at Bramham, where there's a lane closure northbound, and also the contraflow where everyone's sharing the southbound carriageway between Wentbridge and Darrington near Pontefract. The last report I had was 8 miles of crawling traffic from Bramham.
3 decades of hit music. BBC Radio Leeds.
I blame you for the moonlit sky and the dream that died.
When we set off this season, I never, ever, in my wildest dreams, thought the championship would be anything but a remote possibility because of all the problems that you saw ahead in terms of number of games, players, squad, etc. But I have to say that the players have been magnificent. We've had disappointments. We went out to Manchester United twice in the 2 cups, and every time they bounced back. And we've lost just 4 games. I mean, I think we've really got John Lukic, who's been down the road before. Nobody else, including myself, have been down the road before, and they stood up magnificently. It's difficult not to feel a great deal of sympathy for Alex Ferguson.
Wallace picks up. Wallace turns well to Speed. Nice play by Gary Speed and Wallace. Now a good turn. Wallace, bit of a play. Advances 20 yards. Going towards the penalty area now. Great run by Rob Wallace this. Can he get a shot in? McAllister's arriving. Wallace shoots. Oh, what a great goal. What a super goal from Rob Wallace. He ran half the pitch. He turned beautifully. He shot home. And that's a goal worthy of a championship celebration. And here come the Leeds United team. Gordon Strachan, Lee Chapman, John Lukic, John Newsom, David Batty, Gary Speed, Tony DeRigo, Chris Fairclough, Chris White, Gary McAllister, Rod Wallace, Stevie Hodge, Eric Cantona, Mel Sterling coming out there, John McLaren's there, Dylan Kerr, Peter Haddock, who has not been able to figure much in the action due to injury, Alan Sutton and Mick Hennigan at the back. Gordon Strachan has the trophy in his hands. Leeds United are the champions, and a road celebrates. Gordon Strachan holds the trophy aloft.
After Lunch with Levy, Peter Levy on BBC Radio Leeds.
And who thought we wouldn't get this far? Friday afternoon. I hope you're okay. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining me. Just after 3, of course, it's the second half of our afternoon. Liz will be here talking to a woman who's done more by the age of 32 than most of us do in a lifetime. New head of the North Yorkshire National Parks, former private secretary to some of Britain's most important politicians. Sounds fascinating chat. She is Heather Hancock talking to Liz just after 3. But in the first hour this afternoon, we should be talking about some of our little rituals. Why we do the same things at the same time every day. It's like me sitting here at about 6 minutes past 2 every day reading this. All that, and of course, round table. Leeds solicitor Neil Goodrum and former Leeds landlady Joyce Ives, and actress will be with us in the studio to look at some of the stories from the week's news. You're staying? Yes, Peter, we are indeed.
Now then, still to come on Check Out this afternoon, we're going back to school with the huge cost of taking the family away during the holidays, half term for a lot of families, of course, this week. And is the end nigh for The Undertaker? We've got that coming up. Also, would you like to hear all of the Barron Knights singing their fantastic little song, Get Down, Chef?
Now you must have seen Blue, Peter.
Then you need to call us and tell us.
BBC Radio Leeds Time Saver Travel.
This is live on BBC Radio Leeds with Liz Rhodes, John Hammond, and with Dave Woods as well, as we welcome Nelson Mandela to the freedom of the City of Leeds. We'll hear next from the Lord Mayor, who'll invite Councillor Brian Walker, the leader of Leeds City Council, to give his speech in appreciation of Dr Mandela.
I therefore put formally to the Council, with a fair degree of confidence, that we elect to be an honorary freeman of the city, Dr Nelson Mandela. Is that agreed by all members? All those in favour, show. The formality insists that I take any votes against.
My Lord Mayor, I formally declare my acceptance of the role of honorary freeman of the City of Leeds.
This is BBC Radio Leeds, West Yorkshire's #1 for news.
And the headlines at 9 o'clock. Police in Bradford say the streets are calm this morning after a night of violent clashes.
I was down last night with 3 of my clergy who live here, who work here, who are right amongst all this, who know lots of the local people. I came to support them, and I came to indicate to people that people outside the area care very much and want to help.
Call News Talk now with your opinion. 0113 244 3222.
Let's go straight to Bradford. Nuzat's in Bradford. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you for calling.
You're welcome.
What would you like to say?
I just want to say that I'm absolutely devastated by this. I was hoping that people would keep a cool head and behave intelligently and just stay off the street. There was no need for this kind of confrontation in the first place.
Jackie, who listens to us in Keighley in Yorkshire, she thought that she's one of my MySpace friends, one of my virtual friends there on MySpace, and she insisted that myself and Edouard Lapaglia were one and the same person.
Hey, Martin, why would somebody think that?
I've no idea, but
I don't.
She's watching on the webcam tonight and has now accepted that you are, of course, the genuine article.
Oui, Martin, why don't you just do what I did, Martin, and clone yourself like Dolly the sheep?
I could possibly do that. And that's why we're too hot for Humberside.
Too hot for Humberside.
That's right.
It's Martin Kellner's Late Thing.
That's right, you tell him. Right.
So, Martin, qu'est-ce qui se passe in the great wide world out there, outside these 4 walls?
Now, here's something that I actually played on BBC Radio Leeds earlier in the week, and I enjoyed playing it so very much that I said I'm going to play it again late night, and here it is, Bobby Darin.
New York on Sunday, big city taking a nap.
Who was the puppet on a string, first of all?
Oh, now then.
Oh, heck.
No, ask me, tell me something, ask me something that's, give me a clue.
Well, right, the piece of music that we played was her song, wasn't it? The Puppet on a String.
Yeah.
And she used to walk around in bare feet. She was married to Jeff Banks. She might have been a stranger on the shore. What would you find on the beach?
Oh.
Don't say jugs of tea, Mary, for God's sake.
What? I find on the shore, what pieces of wood and...
No, I know, but what would you be walking on, Mary, on the beach?
Pebbles.
Pebbles, right. But what if not pebbles? What else might there be there?
Rocks.
But what might there be most of?
Sand.
Yes. And you're on the shore.
Waves, sea.
No, Mary, you're going off you're going off in the wrong direction, Mary. You've already got to the sand bit now, and you're on the shore. So who might it be who sang the song "Puppet on a String"?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, Mary.
In the morning.
We've already got you 3/4 of the way there, Mary, haven't we? Because we know that there's a lot of sand on the shore, don't we?
Yes.
Yes. So who sang the song?
Well, Sandy Shore?
Yes, Mary.
Comes through on Sunday in New York.
Excellent. Sunday in New York, and that's the great Bobby Darin.
So,
Now we are 50 years old. That 2-year-long experiment has become a part of everyday life in West Yorkshire. In many ways, we sound very different compared with 1968, but you can hear what's been inherited, in the same way that maybe a child unwittingly copies the way its parents speak. And John Cundy, who came to Radio Leeds to run the newsroom in 1979, reckons there's some truth in all of that, saying Radio Leeds has definitely matured into something quite special.
It was a very, very different situation from now. We would have nothing like the staffing available, and effectively the station was run by the manager, the programme organiser and the news editor. He was the kingpin. But I found, with all due dignity to those who were here, it was the newsroom was in chaos. It was disorganised, in many cases amateurish, and I had a big job to rebuild it, which we did over the years into what I lay on it. Don't sound as one blowing my own trumpet. I am. We made it probably the top local radio newsroom in the country in the end. The output now is, I would say, so much slicker. I always liken local radio in its infancy to a baby. When a little baby plays and does all sorts of daft, off-the-wall sorts of things, then it has to grow up and become serious and adult-like. And then you then find, whereas you had 39 very, very different local radio stations, all in their own image across the country, now, from on high, they're much more regimented.
And very soon Radio Leeds brings you its first transmissions at 5:30.
BBC Radio Leeds on 388 metres medium wave and stereo VHS 92.4.
Hi there everyone, good morning. Welcome once again to Sit Down and Sing. Your old pal Arnold Loxton here saying welcome to the show. And
tonight is the turn of Collingham and Linton AFC, and with me are Greg Mountain, Ken Parkin and Phil Shaw.
Afternoon, Liz will be here talking to a woman who's done more by the age of 32 than most of us do in a lifetime.
This is live on BBC Radio Leeds with Liz Rhodes, John Hammond and with Dave Woods as well.
And the headlines at 9 o'clock. Police in Bradford say the streets are calm this morning.
Good morning, this is Clive Settle.
All right, you're with the breakfast team at BBC Radio Leeds. Hope you had a great weekend.
Right, it's about fruit trees this summer. Okay. The plum tree, 3 branches, unfortunately, was away, just broke.
Plum trees are amazing, the amount of weight that can come on a very frail branch. If you can look for some forked branches, they make an ideal prop.
Huddersfield's German defender Christopher Schindler has unbearable responsibility on his shoulders. Right-footed Schindler scores the goal that fires Huddersfield Town into the Premier League. In sporting terms, a life-changing moment that some must come true.